Well, hi everybody. I'm so glad everybody's here today. I've been so looking forward to this session. First one of 2025. So welcome. I am Anika Millington and I do a lot of work, usually with post-cancer patients, coaching and working on bridging that gap between treatment and this new, random, wonderful new normal space that we're in. And returning to work after a cancer journey, it's a time in your life that brings up so many different emotions. And while it's a bit of a milestone and it can bring a sort of a sense of normalcy, whatever that means, but it also can be just a really strange space and a little bit vulnerable and all of those things. So we're going to have a talk today about some areas to focus on and just have a think about and things to have in place if you're thinking about going back to work, whether it's a position you've already had before or it's a new one or it's just, something that's starting to ruminate for you. Just a super quick introduction if nobody's come before. I walked my own cancer path for about 2 years, about 8 years ago now. I had stage 3 bowel cancer. And so that was a 2-year journey that I walked. And after that, there was a few complications and some more surgery and the whole nine. And after that, I did a bit of a pivot and studied some coaching diplomas and things so that I could work in the space of, I found that there was just this gap between treatment and sort of the new normal when you just needed something, but not quite sure what that was. So it's been a real privilege to be able to share space with everybody in the same boat and really start to be able to focus on and draw on the things that collectively people want to talk about and want to pay attention to now. So that's me. So it's a real privilege to work with everybody. So thank you for being here. So no matter what position you are in with returning to the workforce, the intention today is just to make that a little bit more comfortable. So everybody will have a different story, whether it's going back to a job that they've already had or looking for a new one or starting something on your own. So hopefully what we're doing today will really help that transition be more comfortable. And we're also going to remember to give ourselves a lot of compassion and a lot of grace for the cancer journey we've undertaken and not to minimize anything that comes with that. Healing is not a linear journey, as I'm sure everybody here can attest to. Everyone's timeline is different, good days and bad days, and it's just learning to manage that, right? So I've sent you, or Christine sent you guys out yesterday, a workbook that goes along with today's session. So everything I'm talking to today is and you may not have had a chance to have a look at it or print it out, and that's fine. But everything I'm talking to today, all of the notes are in there. So I'm sort of just expanding on what's in there. So if you want to take a second afterwards or at some other point and just have a read through, all the notes are there. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a solid self-care plan. And this is a really, really important part of this transition post-cancer or returning to work. And I keep saying it in my coaching, but the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. And I'm a really firm believer that the solid self-care plan is literally the key to just unlocking that feeling good and feeling purpose-led and happy and living in alignment. Consistent self-care builds confidence and resilience, because confidence comes from honoring the commitments that we make to ourselves. And it means that, when life's hard stuff happens, we're in a much better position to cope. So having your self-care plan set up is really important before we return to work, because everyone deserves to have feeling good as being the baseline way of living most of the time, and we all need to take responsibility for this. And it means something slightly different for all of us. We need to understand how, we talk about self-care, and I love a bubble bath and a manicure as much as anybody else, but I'm talking about the real self-care that's, lifelong and that we need to have in place. So how we approach self-care from a coaching perspective is there's 3 main areas. We talk about physical care, headspace care, and heart space care. So that's another way of saying mind, body, and soul connection, or mind, body, spirit connection, which is so interconnected and really important that we acknowledge one, because if one of those things is out, the other 2 don't flow. So to get this into a plan, we create a menu, and we've done a whole coaching session on self-care, and I'm very happy to do another one later on this year if this is of interest to anybody. But physical care, that is essentially moving our body. We all know we need to do it, and we all know we need to put something in place we're consistent with. But it's not just exercise. It's also about just getting curious about what that means for you. Would you benefit from physiotherapy care post your cancer journey? Would it benefit for you to speak to somebody who specializes in nutrition or supplementation to help with any long-term side effects, or long-term side effects from chemo, or just starting to get, I'm not saying going from 0 to 100 and going from 0 to becoming a workout demon overnight, but making some really small and consistent adjustments that could really make a big difference for you. So just get curious about what's going on for you and how does it feel? We all know what we need to do, but it's finding a way of making that work for us long term and on a daily basis. So the body movement, whether it's going walking, whether it's is it feasible to look at some kind of trainer? Do I need some kind of physiotherapy? Starting to feel strong again is a really, really positive thing, and there's some really great care and help out there for this. So things like hydration, do I need to work on that? Supplementation, all of those things. So that comes under the physical care umbrella. So start to cultivate a bit of a list of the things you might even be curious about doing. And another one of my classes, an Australian class, there's a lady who came and she came back to the second class and said she'd taken up line dancing as a result, and this was her thing, and she was obsessed in doing it forever and ever. So it's a great time just to think about anything, what it is that you loved. Usually what you loved to do when you were a little kid is a pretty good place to start to just move the body again. And then we have headspace care. So this is caring for our mind. It's a time to get curious about, would I benefit from some kind of therapy? How am I feeling with this, really and truly? Where's it sitting? And sometimes this can take a while to get your head around. You might go, yep, I'm fine. This is great. I'm all getting back to normal. And then 6 months, 9 months down the track, something comes up and you feel back to square one again. So it might be a wonderful time just to get a bit curious about, could I benefit from some kind of therapy? Doesn't need to be sitting with a counsellor 3 times a week, but is there something that I might like to address just to nip that in the bud? Is it some kind of coaching? Is it getting into listening to some podcasts about some kind of healing work or motivation? Reading? Is there journaling or some kind of higher learning? When we surround ourselves with that kind of information coming in really regularly, it's such a healing thing to do. And there's some wonderful podcasters out there on, it's not even necessarily just post-cancer podcasting or to do with that journey, but overall life's challenges and resilience building, those sorts of things. So that's a headspace care. So again, it's just getting curious about what might I like to do, and just being really honest with oneself about it. Usually your body will tell you, oftentimes there might have been a bit of a whisper in your ear for some time about something that might be of benefit. So just write it down. And then we have heart space care, which is essentially caring for the spirit. And this is really just developing a spiritual connection of your own understanding, whatever that means for you. Focusing on the spirit, focusing on your energy. And again, that raises that baseline level of feeling good. Whether it's something that you have been curious about, whether your journey might have brought up different perspectives on things. It can be really interesting just to give those a little bit of airspace, and have a think about how it feels and how do I feel about that side of stuff. And so when we have, and again, writing down some things that we could do. So that's where we do look into meditation and mindfulness and the spiritual connection of one's own understanding. So if you're very new to meditation or being present, mindfulness, those sorts of things, there's quite a cool little exercise that can be really helpful. And we call it the daily design. And it's just taking a second to sit quietly by yourself, close your eyes in a few deep breaths, and just think and to design your ideal day in your head right from start to finish. And the one rule is that you're not allowed to judge yourself for it. And there's no feeling guilty. So if I could design my perfect day, what time do I wake up? And what do I do first? Do I get up? Do I journal? Do I brush my teeth? Do I make a cup of tea? What do I do first? And then from there, what do I flow into? What do I eat for breakfast that day? Or when do I put in my going for my walk, or sitting to do my meditation, or reading, or podcasting? And then what do I do? Do I go to work? What do I do for those few hours? Where am I working? When I go for my walk, where am I walking? Am I in the bush? Am I on the beach? Am I in my garage? Because I know that that's the convenient space and I'm going to get it done. What do I eat for lunch? And the thing with this is that oftentimes we get to sort of this stage in life and you don't know what you want or don't know what you like anymore, because those things sort of change. And it's a really nice exercise just to let it in and let out what it is that you want. And that can be a little sometimes confronting, because we're used to putting our own needs last and feeling guilty for it. But this is a really great way of going, no, hold on a second. What do I want? What am I wearing that day? What am I eating for lunch? Am I meeting a friend for coffee? Who am I meeting for coffee? And then you go really detailed right through the whole day, right down to what time do I go to bed? What did I do just before I go to bed? What was my sort of evening routine? And what this does is it starts to really create some focus on how you want things to look. When we talk about raising that baseline level, just feeling good as being that baseline way of being, it starts to help you focus on what that looks like for you, because often we can just jump back into life and the day rules us rather than us ruling the day. And so this is a really cool way to start to design that day and start to get some intention behind what we're doing. And again, it's a practice. So self-care is a practice, and essentially it's made up of two things, which is self-discipline and habit stacking. So it sounds a little bit harsh, but hear me out. Self-discipline means loving yourself enough to do the things that make you feel like the best version of yourself, unapologetically and consistently. So when we look at it from that perspective, if that's what self-love is, when you think about it, we're already disciplined about lots of things. We brush our teeth, we turn up to work on time, we make appointments on time, we clean the toilet, we do, whether we like it or not, we have some things that we need to be disciplined about. And I think self-care needs to be one of those things as well. And so habit stacking is essentially just taking a current habit we have, and stacking on top of it the new one that we want. So when we talk about, for example, we could be going for our walk while we've got our headphones on with a really great learning podcast or some uplifting music, or we're stacking those habits. So we're taking care of our physical space and our mental space at the same time. Or for example, if you're wanting to, supplementation's another one. I don't know about you guys, but I am very guilty of having lots of jars of untaken, expensive supplements on my cabinet. But to habit stack that, we go, right, every time I brush my teeth, I take my supplement. So they've got to sit next to the toothbrush. So it's just those sorts of things that are really making sure we integrate. We're wanting more, more movement, more health, more love, more connection, more feeling good and more joy. And when we're focusing on what we focus on grows, where we water the garden, it grows. So when we're focusing on these things that really do bring the joy, that genuinely does start to filter into all areas. So that is habit stacking. And again, just to round that off, self-care really is a practice, and if you, like a lot of people, feel really guilty about that. But again, there is no need to feel guilty about it. It's really important. It gives others permission to do the same in a way. But it's just deciding that this is really important. These are the things I'm going to incorporate, and it will become habit over time. So that is self-care in a nutshell. There's a whole lot more to it, but I guess I just encourage everybody to start to get curious about the things under those three headings that are going to cultivate joy and cultivate health and cultivate healing. And they are so connected. If there's something out in one of those areas, everything else can feel off. And so it's really great that if you get the speed wobbles on a certain day, you can go, wait, hold on, where am I out? And you start to feel it. Is it my head? Is it my heart? Or is it my body? And you've got a menu of things you can turn to start to get that back into alignment. The second area to focus on is controlling your narrative. And this is a really, really important thing to take some time to do. So take control of your narrative in communications. So returning back to work, what am I going to say? Who do I tell? What do I have to do? You're under no obligation to divulge any information about your cancer journey that you don't want to. You're not. And it may be really helpful, however, if you've already been in a position that there's somebody there that you trust, that you can give some information to, just so that you've got a support system there. A lot of companies are really, really supportive of health. So if you're under no obligation to disclose anything, but it's really important to take the time just to sit and decide what you are comfortable with them knowing. Is there a person who that you could go and have a talk to prior to your return to work, manager, a colleague that you trust, because it means that they can really support you in the way. And it's not about a pity party at all. It's just making sure that there's things in place to support you on your return. And you can communicate your needs to them. People really appreciate solutions. They love it when you come with solutions. So have a think about, well, how do I want to approach this? Can you do a gradual return to work? Would that work in your industry? Could you do some hours from home? Could you do reduced hours? How to decide what you want and what you think will work for you to start with, and just go from there. So if you bring that to management or to your person, that they're usually, generally speaking, people are pretty supportive because you're coming in with a solution. And I'll get to how we manage other people as number 5, but it's just what I'm saying here is just you can control your narrative and communications, but getting ahead of that before you're in the position where you might be asked questions and people don't know what to say, which I'll come to soon, but you can control what people know and what they don't know, and that is your business. And you have a think about what you're comfortable divulging ahead of time. So then you can come up with something to say if there's things you don't really want to talk about. And people of mine say, look, I just don't want to talk about that, but thank you for asking. And people get it. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful if you're preempting those communications before you go back. It's a really important start point. Oh, and then the Cancer Society's got some really cool information on their website about this as well. I'm not an employment lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but there is some information about that on the Cancer Society website. And it just sort of elaborates on what I've just said, really, that you're not bound to tell anybody anything. And employers, if it's a new interview, they're not allowed to directly ask. So, again, you can control what you tell people. Which leads on to number 3, which is being aware of your limitations, whether it is just know and understand and just be okay with any limitations that you may have, both short and long term, things like fatigue or neuropathy. I'm 8 years down the track and I still have neuropathy, but in chemo brain are all really, really real and last for different amounts of time for different people. And it's not about planning to fail or trying to create more anxiety about it, that how do I deal with this in the workplace? But it's just understanding it so that you know how you may be affected and putting a plan in place in advance. So if there is a manager or trusted person in the workplace, you can say, listen, I'm coming back. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm wanting things to be, I guess, as normal as I can. My issue is I've got some chemo brain, so it could affect me in A, B, and C way. And sometimes the fatigue, you can have days of being great, and then you might have a day of the fatigue comes in those waves again. So potentially also you could then have a code word with this person that if you are feeling overwhelmed or you are struggling that day, you can have a code word with this person that you trust, that finger signal, whatever it is, that I'm out, I'm gone for the day. No questions asked, and you can go away and just take some time and do what you need to do. Because you've got your self-care plan in place, you can go back to that and just sit with it and work out what it is. And the overwhelm's really, really normal as well, of all of a sudden feeling an intense overwhelm. And I'll touch on this again soon, but often it can be just that instant realization that everybody else has moved on, as well they should, but I'm still sitting here and I feel really different. And all of a sudden that can be really overwhelming. Because it brings up that alone feeling. So again, it's just understanding what that is before it happens. And it may not happen. It may not even be an issue. And going back to work can be an amazing distraction and really help create the normalcy. All I'm saying is, if we're aware of potential limitations in advance, there's things we can put in place to make sure that we're supported in that. So hopefully that's helpful. So the fourth thing is take charge of your long-term care plan. So this is an amazing way of helping manage any fear and anxiety around in the post-cancer space. It's very normal to go, oh my goodness, is this done? Some days worse than others. So this means booking in as many of your appointments as you can in advance. So whether that is 3 monthly blood tests, scans, physio appointments, checkups, take advantage of all of them and book them in, get them in the diary as far in advance as you can. It's a really great way of managing the fear because you've got these, you know that you're being monitored, you've got these appointments in the diary for X amount of time, so you don't have to worry about it yet. It's the worry can come and go, oh my gosh, I haven't done my blood test and I'm a month overdue, or that's not anxiety that we need. So having these in the diary well in advance is an amazing way of really helping with that, to manage those anxiety levels. And also other things that might not pertain to your particular journey, whether it's a skin check or a mammogram or all of that stuff that we all need to be doing every year regardless. Get them in the diary, knowing it's there. I mean, yes, you know it's coming up, but it's a lot less anxiety around that than, oh my gosh, I haven't booked it in and now I'm overdue and how long do I have to wait to get in? And don't forget the nice stuff. There's some amazing, nice healing things that happen around, that can really be so healing, like massage work or energy work or anything that supports your physical and mental health long term. Having them booked in advance is, I can't explain how amazing this is for reducing anxiety levels. And again, healing isn't linear. There's good days and there's bad days, and that sudden overwhelm can be a real thing. And just get curious about what that means for you, because that all circles back to the self-care plan. Because if you go, okay, I feel like I've gone back, but I am struggling a bit with overwhelm and thinking, oh my gosh, I feel so different and nothing else has changed outside my world. Very, very normal. But again, it's understanding that in advance. And as I said, have a think about who your trusted person can be. If you're comfortable talking to your team, if you're comfortable talking to your colleagues, they can provide a lot of support in terms of, as I said, it's not about feeling pity for the person. It's about having that support that if you need to go, you can go. Or if you need to go and take a minute, you can take a minute. Because they're going to have things happen in their lives too, and you're going to be able to give them the support that they need. So it really is a two-way street. So, and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself when booking these appointments in long term, and don't feel guilty of, oh my gosh, I'm taking up an appointment that somebody else could have when I don't really need it anymore or whatever. Have it in there. It's really your physical and mental health is number one. And so that leads me on to preparing for humans being humans. This is kind of the fifth area to have a think about. People often don't really know what to do or say in perceived difficult situations. There could be comments made that feel triggering or offensive, or sometimes people will say absolutely nothing to avoid the topic because they don't know what to say, or they might find it really scary to talk about, and that can feel more offensive than saying something, and everybody needs something different from people. So if you have, again, having the plan in place for a random hard day and working out what your narrative is and what you're comfortable telling people and what you're not. Would you prefer your team to, or a manager to talk to your team before you come back? Would that make you feel better? Or would you like to talk to people in a meeting situation? Just have a think about what will feel comfortable for you, or not at all. If that's what you want to do and you would rather just go, no, I'm going to get back into it, and then if things come up and if I'm struggling, then we'll go into the care plan. We'll go into having a meeting and maybe talking about it. But as I said, having that plan in place for a random hard day means that you can just give somebody a sign, or you can disappear if you need to, no questions asked and no judgment taken. And generally speaking, people love to be needed. they love to. And they want to help, and they want to support, and they want to welcome people back and often have a conversation, but they just need direction. It's like the same way that people love solutions, with what you're going to need to come back to work comfortably. Sometimes people want to know what you need to say, and you might not even know what that is. But I guess that just comes back to going, do I want to talk about this, or do I not want to talk about it? And how much do I want to say? And then people can just, there'll be that time, and people can just give you what it is that you need to get right back into it. And the other reason it's important to have booking these things in long term is because removing that anxiety creates so much more room for all the joy to come in, and the happy stuff and the great things that can come from being back in the workplace, and regular conversations again, and what's changed and what's new, and this is great, and there'll be more opportunity. So just really advocate for what you need and have all of that in place. And if there are any things said with humans being human, it's just remembering it isn't you, it is them. It's just the things that it could bring up for some people if there's any kind of a comments made. But yeah, it is your narrative, and you don't need to disclose anything that you don't want to. Is there any questions? Would anyone like to say anything in the chat? You can just pop in the chat or unmute yourself and chat if you'd like to. If anyone's had any experience they're wanting to share with the group, you don't have to, but please feel free. No? That's all right, you don't have to. We've rocketed through this information, everybody.
Yes,
is somebody...
You've nailed it, I think. You've nailed all the areas, and it's really nice to hear somebody else talking about the self-care stuff, and I think you've been really concise. So one of the things that I have found really useful is Qigong. Think Tai Chi, so it's like that.
Yeah.
So, and it's got that mindfulness, the self-care aspect, mind management, emotion management, self-awareness, but it's also got that really slow moving. And I'm only like 5 days post-op, and so I'm having to adapt everything, but I just feel so much better. Going back to the movement, and there's a couple of online classes, and so I've done that even though I can't do everything. I just adapt that side, and I feel so much better. And just one other thing I noticed yesterday, it started. So I noticed I was feeling a little bit tearful, and it was just a little short wave. And I knew that there wasn't any particular thing that I was feeling tearful about. I thought it's possibly anesthetic chemical reaction. Plus, I mean, my whole life has changed. I've had to stop work. So there's all of that, but I've kind of got habituated to that. But that sudden, intense wave of emotion has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I find thinking about, life comes in waves. The physical universe, everything is waves, isn't it? But just knowing that there's a beginning, a middle, and end, and if I can just come back into myself for a moment and breathe and be kind to myself, that is my key to surf it. And
I think you've hit the nail on the head too, because we're not great at being
eventually.
You do. Yeah, we're not great overall at being really kind to ourselves. We give and give and give, and why would we give so much love and care and kindness to our best friend or family member, or even someone who isn't a best friend, but yet we struggle to give that to ourselves? And oftentimes, and unfortunately, it can take such a big life event to force us to get there. And I always sort of think that's why I love to do this work. Imagine if we could learn to get there before these big things happen. So as we approach it, we have such a different lens, and that's not to detract from the magnitude of what's happened or the journey, but it just, as you say, you learn to come back to the truth, and you learn to come back to center. And that's where the self-care plan is so important, because you're consistently focusing on all of these things at once, and you can really feel when you're out of alignment, especially after a journey, and everybody's is different, but when you can be feel so out of control of your body and so separate from your body, it's an amazing way of being able to come back to that center. And as you say, it's amazing to say the emotion, as you say, you've put it very, very succinctly, in that those all of a sudden emotions have a beginning and a middle and an end, and it's just sitting with that, as uncomfortable as that can be, and just letting that come through. Sometimes it can be medically induced, but oftentimes it's emotion coming through. We're human beings, and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And there's so many layers to this journey, and there's so many, sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or 2 steps forward and 10 steps back, but then I got 10 steps forward again. So it is not linear. So no wonder our emotions can feel all over the show, not to mention how hormones affect that whole thing. There's so many layers. So it is just sitting with that and not trying to force it to be over faster, but knowing, letting that out is actually okay. It's a relief, and it is a release, and it is emotion. And it's like any kind of grief. If somebody we love has passed away a long time ago, you might have a day 5-10 years down the track where all of a sudden it's back again, and we just have to have compassion for that and be with that and let that flow through. It's love with nowhere to go. That's what they say. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share?
Yeah. I just wanted to hear about, something that I've found useful as I've been going into work and sitting in the lunchroom, and all my colleagues come and go, and we have a yarn and a chat, and I mean, I'm quite open about where I am, but it's been quite a good practice run, and it had been going well till sort of the last time I went. And one of our social workers breezed in and she goes, "Oh, Claire, I've just got this new client who's got terminal cancer, and I want to pick your brain." And I just went, "Oh." And it's interesting because I hadn't thought about that sort of question, and I hadn't thought about how I would react. So it was a good practice to sort of it freaked me out, and I just talked to someone else. But it was good because I was able to come home and ponder it. And then I emailed her and just sort of said, "Hey, look, I'm still on my own journey." So I had time to sort of build an answer and think about, which is now going to be my answer in the future, is, I'm still on my own journey, and, my journey's not over, and I'm not in a good space to be able to do this sort of thing. And but and she apologized, and I said, "No, look, I didn't know that would be an issue until it happened. I didn't think." And so, I mean, going in for a practice run and being around your colleagues is actually really a good way of just testing the waters to how you react to different things. Because, that humanness side, I mean, people say dumb things. It's just how it is. We all do it. And until something's said, we don't know how we're going to react. Yeah. So anyway,
that's something quite not related. It's, and you don't know. And I guess that's why, rather than feeling anxious about that, as you say, now you know you've got an answer prepared. And that's what I mean. That was an insensitive comment, not made with any level of malice. Because she didn't know where you were at. There might be somebody that's like, "Yeah, pick me, I can talk about it." Not many, but
that communication. You were saying about communication, and I think that's really important for us. I mean, in my work, I talk to people about scripts. Have a bit of a pat answer where you give someone, if you use the same one for everyone, it gets really easy. A sort of a pat answer of telling them a little bit of something, not too much, but enough to keep them on their way. Because usually people, how are you? They don't want to know the full story, really. But having a pat answer of, "Oh, I'm okay, I'm still going through treatment, but, I'm looking at coming back to work," and just repeating that over and over, it kind of, gets a lot of that out of the way. Yeah. But it's those unknown ones that are going to come at you, eh?
Absolutely. And that's what I mean about having that little code word or something, that if someone does say something and you all of a sudden find yourself in floods of tears, you can just exit the building and take a little second. Thank you for sharing that. It's a really important one. It's what I was trying to get at with, you don't know what will be said. And 99.9% of the time, nothing is said out of any level of malice or ill intent. It's just people say dumb stuff sometimes. And And you
there's
can't
so much
unsay that.
unknown. It's being able to hold that. There's so much unknown about this return to work
So much
journey.
unknown, and it feels so different. Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining today. I hope we sort of covered the main things without going too in depth on all of them. But the notes that you've been emailed, everything we've talked about today is in there. So if you just want to have a refer back and have a little bit of a read through just before, while you're making your transition back to work or having a think about making your transition back to work, there's so much support out there. So please take advantage of it. And just hopefully that will make it just that much more comfortable for you. So thank you so much for joining today.